Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hi, this is Nick Anastasiou, lead editor and writer on Maul Shadowlord, and you're listening to Aggressive Negotiations.
Welcome to a very special episode of Aggressive Negotiations, your Star Wars podcast on the Nerd Party Network that explores the nooks and crannies of the English muffin that is the Star Wars galaxy. I am one of your humble hosts, Jedi Master John Mills, and with me is the non-humble, in fact, the braggadocious Jedi Master Matthew Rushing. Matt, are you ready to talk about some classic literature today?
I am now.
All right. Matt has his trusty book reading beverage with him, and this is sort of a summer reading series, I would say, where we are looking back at a choice piece of Star Wars material from the 1990s, from the beloved expanded universe that so many fans online still have not let go of. And I am going to say, before we start talking about this, please be sure we love to read more than books, your reviews over on Apple Podcasts. Go ahead and leave us one over there, along with a star rating. We would appreciate it. And you can find us on the socials at the Jedi Masters, and also as part of the network at Join Nerd Party, and of course, the Nerd Party on Facebook and Instagram. So, Matt, here we are, 1995's Darksaber by Kevin J. Anderson. Hard on the heels of his success with the Jedi Academy trilogy, where that was a best-selling series, introduced us to Kip Durin, and also, the establishment of Luke's temple on Yavin 4, all of these things, actually reference to Exar Kun, who was from the comics, further tying those universes together. All of these great things that are going on. And so he comes back following the success of Children of the Jedi by Barbara Hambly, which introduced us to Callista, who was Luke's great love.
Was that what
it was a successful book.
Say
Listen, Bantam had nothing but bestsellers in the 90s, it seemed. And the Star Wars series was just absolutely a license to print cash for that publisher. So whether or not I liked Children of the Jedi is irrelevant. I actually hardly remember it. I remember some of it, but it was a success. And Darksaber follows that up. And I just got to ask you, did you read this? You're too young to have been reading this in the 90s, right?
Oh, no. I was absolutely reading these things. I'm John.
Okay.
I think I've told this story before, but I mean, I just clearly remember when the EU began and walking past the Walden books. It's clearly indelibly in my mind. I could never get it out, and realizing there was going to be more Star Wars. And with the Timothy Zahn series and with Thrawn. And so absolutely, I was highly it's hard to overestimate how much I was into the Star Wars books at this point, especially since the special editions are about to come out in a year. And for me, being the kid who had never seen Star Wars in the theater, the books really had a massive impact on how I felt about Star Wars, because besides watching the movies for 500 times on VHS, all I had other than that were the books. And so I kind of devoured just about as many books as I possibly could, and even at that point,
as did I,
certain books had better reputations than others. But yeah, I mean, I had read the Thrawn trilogy, and I had read, all these other books, like, I'm trying to think at that point, I think.
Listen, there were so many. Yeah. There was Truth of Bakura, there was Crystal Star,
which we've talked
there was Courtship of Princess Leia, there was Tales of the Bounty Hunters, Tales of the Empire, Tales of everything, all over the place. And Darksaber is right there. Yep. I mean, when this gets released in 95, we're a year out from Shadows of the Empire. You're talking about resurgent Star Wars toy line coming out with that, everything, whole 9 yards. And, so I'm there, I'm reading every single book that's coming out back then, like every single one. Didn't miss a single one. Still one of the greatest mistakes of my life, getting rid of all of my first editions. I used to have them all.
Man. I feel exactly the same.
And I actually had a hardcover. If it was a hardcover, I bought it hardcover, fresh and new.
Same.
And I had the hardcover of Darksaber, and I'll relate this story. I actually had it signed by Kevin J. Anderson.
Really?
At an X-Files convention.
Wow.
At the Naval Surface Weapons Testing Center in Silver Spring, Maryland. Yes, kids, that's how fringe nerd festivals were back then. I went to an X-Files convention at the Naval Surface Weapons Center in Silver Spring, Maryland. Okay. That place, by the way, is now decommissioned, but at one time they insisted they didn't actually test anything serious there. And then something went boom and blew out everybody's windows for a mile around it. So, I guess we danced around fate, but he actually signed it on the inside, on the first page, to John, never trust a Hutt, Kevin J. Anderson. And it's the only interaction I've ever had with the guy. And I remember him. He was a delightful person. He was super sweet. He was really nice. He was there because he was also writing X-Files stuff. And I'm the one guy that showed up with a Star Wars book that was like, could you sign this for me? And we had a great time talking. So obviously we're best friends. He sends me a Christmas card every year. Obviously, that's the implication. But I got to ask you coming back here to Darksaber, were you looking forward to reading it? Did you like it back in the 90s? Or is it one of those forgettable ones where you're like, what exactly happened here?
No, I always remember this book in the sense of that they had a resurgence of the Death Star, but just creating the laser cannon. Mm-hmm. I always remember that part of it, but and I remember the Hutts were part of it, but I didn't really remember some of the other aspects. So I want to frame this way for me. Coming back to reread this was an interesting experience because this year listened to the Thrawn trilogy. I walk almost every day, and so I'm doing that for about an hour a day. So I've been listening to books that I've previously read that I wanted to be able to read again, but I thought what a great way to experience them differently by listening to them. And so listened to the Thrawn trilogy, and then I listened to the Hand of Thrawn trilogy, which is actually the series that kind of closes out the entire Bantam era before you jump into the New Jedi Order. These were the last like hardcover books really in that era. And so what's interesting about this book to me is so Zahn utilizes a lot of all the characters he created, finds interesting ways to bring them back, and kind of play with your expectations. Hand of Thrawn, you think, oh, Thrawn's got to be back in some way, right? And so this book is incredibly interesting to me because as I'm coming into it, I have that in the back of my mind of an author coming back and writing characters that they've previously written before. And that's exactly what Kevin J. Anderson does in this book, because a lot of the characters that he created for his series, Jedi Academy, he brings back in this series, specifically Admiral Dalla, who I forgot came back in this book. And like Thrawn in the Hand of Thrawn trilogy, the character is thought to be dead. Now, I'm not spoiling whether or not Thrawn is actually back or not. You can go read those yourself at some point. But here, Admiral Dalla was thought to be dead, right? And she resurfaces here. And so I thought that
she sure does.
Yeah, and I thought that was incredibly interesting to have these authors create characters to which they love playing with. And so they find ways to bring them back. And so as I'm reading this, you're asking, like, how did I like it back then? I don't really remember. I think it was like kind of mid-tier for me. But coming into this, having that previous experience with the Hand of Thrawn, this was like, okay, one of these does it, I feel like, really well, and one of it doesn't do it as well, I don't think.
I see what you're saying, and I think this is where you and I will diverge a little bit, is coming back, I remembered the Darksaber itself. I remembered that the Hutts were involved. I remembered that, and here's the spoiler warning, kids, but I don't know why you would be listening to us talk about a 31-year-old book, and not know what happened and everything. I remembered at the time, I loved the way he handled the death of General Madine. I
Best
remember
part of
at
the
the
book.
time,
Yeah.
blew my mind because I was like, they actually killed him. And I do remember talking to him about it. And he said, yeah, I had to get permission to do that.
Mm-hmm.
He had to get permission to get Madine killed. Like
Right.
if you were going to kill a character like that, and it's the whole reason, and this is well established in other interviews, the whole reason that he almost killed Mon Mothma, but wasn't allowed to kill Mon Mothma in the Jedi Academy trilogy is because Lucasfilm came back and said, no, you can't. Not allowed to kill her. So he took her to the edge of death and then brought her back in that series. So in Darksaber, Madine actually dying, the idea that a Hutt would steal the plans and put like the idea of having a Death Star pared down so that it was just the gun, the whole thing coming back to it really felt like Anderson found the chord that is struck by reading one of those old 1950s pulp sci-fi novels that informed Star Wars in the first place. It's way over the top. It's hammy. It's silly. It's nonsense at points, but it's a fast beach read. And you like the characters. You're predisposed to root for the heroes, and you're like, okay. And then he throws in a death, and then you have some comical stuff, and it's like, okay. Now, where did you feel it went too far? Because, it obviously goes over the top at certain points. There's one thing in this book that I actually truly dislike and have always disliked. And I'm curious if we both dislike the same one thing, our number one thing most disliked about the book.
Well, it's hard to pick what I dislike the most because there's a few things, but I will say one of the things that stood out to me as too over the top was this: the idea that some Jedi students can throw an entire fleet across a star system was ludicrous. Like,
a bit overpowered, I'd say.
Yes, and it's interesting because, again, one of the things that Zahn does in his duology is to basically reel Luke back in and reel the Force use back in. And this is one of the prime examples, I think, of the place where it's like the Force is Deus Ex Machina, right? Like it's just, whatever we need the Force to do, anybody can do. I mean, when they're throwing like stones at ships and stuff, I'm like, dude, we barely saw Yoda do anything like this, or even Palpatine,
Right. It feels too easy.
Yes, exactly. And I think
it feels too easy.
Right. And so you mentioned the idea that this is very pulpy and all that. And I agree with you in that sense. This book absolutely captures the idea of like pulp sci-fi where, it does feel like you're watching a Flash Gordon episode. Very much so. Everything is over the top. The villains are over the top. The heroes are over the top. Everything's over the top. And yet I think that and this is where I think my biggest critique of the entire book is just that Star Wars found a way to kind of bring those sensibilities, but then ground them in a way that made things feel real, even when, you have space wizards. And so this kind of jettisons that feeling to where it's like, okay, we've allowed the train to go around the bend too far now, and now I just can't believe it. And to me, that's the place where I couldn't get behind the book the same way it seems like you do.
See, I think that with the pushing the fleet thing, it was so unexpected at the time. And then when I read it this time, I was like, oh, right. Oh, yeah, they did that. I agree it's overpowered, but he at least makes an effort. This book is designed to be read within the context of everything. And so we're supposed to know coming into it that Yavin 4 is like this Force-rich thing, and the temples can focus Force energies from ancient times and stuff like that. And then all of the Jedi students link together, hands across America style, to have the one guy, Dorsk 81, push the fleet away, right? And I think that what's interesting about it is it is over the top, but it didn't take me completely out of it, except that it removes any peril.
Agreed. Yeah,
so that when Dala shows up later, I'm like, well, she doesn't stand a chance.
Right.
And on top of that, maybe this is being an older fan, but I'm sitting there and it's like, oh, yes, Pelion seems like an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're like, we're showing up to show the galaxy a lesson and we're going to kill all the Jedi.
Yeah.
And so we'll send a bunch of ATSTs and TIE fighters. I'm like, you're in Star Destroyers, for Pete's sake. Bombard the planet.
Right.
Like, what do you know, it's sort of like when Kylo Ren is flying toward Rey in The Rise of Skywalker, and it's like, why aren't you just shooting at her? Just shoot at her. Just pull the trigger, for God's sake, right?
Well, and it reminds me, like, remember when Vader in Empire's like, all too easy? And that's this book.
Right.
Everything is all too easy, you know, and there's very little things that can't be, like, with the snap of a finger, feel like they're taken care of, except for the Callista story, which I can't.
I know that bothers you so much.
The story is so bad. I mean, I have read YA novels with way better dialogue. This is, I mean, we've read some Star Wars YA novels that we love. Like, I think Lost Stars, right? You think of
Lost Stars is freaking great. If anybody has not read Star Wars Lost Stars, run out and buy it right now.
It's phenomenal.
Pepsi Challenge.
Yeah, Claudia Gray.
You know Matt will pay you if you don't like it.
Exactly. It's just, man. So
we're not going to honor that, just by the way.
This is just terrible. And the storyline is just so dumb. I think it makes the characters feel stupider. You know, Luke just feels dumb. Callista feels dumb because they're written like really bad teenagers. And nothing about the story even makes sense.
But see, this is where I will give.
In the Star Wars lore, that she would somehow lose her ability to touch the Force, and like she can't be touched by the Force at all. She's not a Yuuzhan Vong. She's not a Silmari.
Hold on though. She winds up able to touch the Force. It's just through the dark side.
Well, yes, and of course she'll play into a later series. Spoiler alert. But
see, this is the thing: is he at least gets her out of the story? Like, I know she's going to come back in the next book, which is unfortunate. But like, I appreciate the fact. Well, it's
unfortunate because the book is Planet of Twilight, which is generally considered like the second worst Star Wars book of all time. So, you know.
Well, you're just making me want to go back and read it now. You know that, right? But I think that.
Oh man!
I think that Anderson really is trying to get her out of the plot, out of the storyline.
Yep.
Like, it really feels like he's doing the work of getting her out. I think the whole idea of the fact that Luke is looking at a student of his, but it's inhabited by the spirit of a ghost that he fell in love with. That's the part where I'm like, what? Like that, what? Like, it's just, it doesn't make any, it doesn't connect. The neurons don't fire. Now, it's also something that's a larger issue overall. And I think with the expanded universe in general, is that there were so many plot lines going on that were open threads carried from book to book. I understand and respect what they were doing, but I honestly think what you're sensing, and I don't have a line on the guy. I'd love to talk to him again. I think Anderson wasn't necessarily happy about being stuck with Callista, if that makes sense. I think if you read the Dorsk 81 and Kip stuff, he's interested in going to Dorsk 81's home planet,
100%.
Examining a different sci-fi angle. Yep. He's interested in bringing Dala back.
100%.
And having Pelayan work with her. I think that while he gets overpowered with the Force on Yavin 4, it's the only way he's going to write himself out of that corner. I think he enjoys the idea of going back to Jabba's palace. I love encountering the guy that Jabba basically tortured by putting his brain in a Bomar monk body, you know, in the spider body, and being like, that was how Jabba got his jollies, right? And I think the Callista thing is just the part of the story that I feel like Anderson he was like, okay, I got to do this part. But it does tie into one of the things that I hate most about the book, and that's the one-armed Wampa leading a Wampa revolution against Luke on Hoth. I really disliked that back in the 90s, and I really dislike it now because it is so ludicrous as to be like, it takes me out of it. It's just laughable. And while I think that's laughable, I think it at least does it's like he had to have some way to get them off of Hoth so that they could go to the asteroid field where the Darksaber is being made and have that, be discovered. I mean, if anything, people might make fun of the fact that, mythologically, Lucas has them continually going back to Tatooine. And that's that sort of like rhythmic Norse mythology sort of thing. So I can get behind that. But going back to Hoth and putting the Darksaber being built in the Hoth asteroid field, it's like it could have been somewhere else. It didn't need to be in movie locations that we knew.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that irritates me about the book. Now, I don't hate the book as a result, but it's something I didn't like about the book. It's a plot element I could have done without.
Yeah, I mean, I think on that front, you're absolutely right. I think 100% there are storylines here that Anderson definitely feels more connected to, and then there's others that he doesn't. One of the things, as you're mentioning on those storylines, I think that I find frustrating personally is that there is a lack of focus in the book in the first place with the stories. We are so all over the place with too many thread lines, and there's not enough cohesion here in the book, and therefore it leaves you feeling as though stories get shortchanged. So, when you have the story with Kip Duran and Dorsk 81, that almost feels like a whole book in and of itself, right? This idea, this exploration.
Sure.
The storyline with Callista and Luke also kind of feels like that it should be its own thing. And I mean, even just the Hutts and the Darksaber project, or Admiral Dalla coming back. All of these feel like storylines that should be their own thing, and yet they get thrown into this mixer. And I find that to be utterly frustrating because none of them gets enough time. And so therefore, one of the issues that we mentioned, where everything just resolves incredibly quickly and easily, becomes the problem, right? We end up in this place where it just feels like everything was too easy. Or you're just so glad that it's not there by the end of the book. You're like, again, with the Callista storyline, oh, thank God she's gone, And so I don't, and this is the thing, and this is where I can't lay this necessarily at Kevin J. Anderson's feet, because I feel like this is an editorial problem more than it is his problem, right? Because the editor at this point for Bantam should have been the one to come back and say to him, okay, we have these ideas, these ideas, these ideas. Okay, as you've written this, it seems like there's maybe a little bit too much going on here. If we simplify this story in this way, do this, focus on these 3 storylines, cut this one out. We don't need it. It's fine. It'll give you more time to play around with this. I think actually it's more of an editorial issue than a Kevin J. Anderson issue. Do you agree with that at all?
I don't reject that, because what I can tell you right off the bat, what I would cut would be Durga the Hutt going and talking to Leia with the little weird monkey creatures that break into the servers. I would have kept the Hutts and the Imperials off to the side and had an Imperial remnant who thought Dalla was dead building the Darksaber. I would have had Dalla checking in at the Darksaber and saying, okay, cool. The only thing that can stop this is the Jedis, and I'm going to go blow them up. Right? I would have found a way to tie all of them together. Or have Palayan working on it when Dalla shows back. Whatever the solution is. That would have, I think, collapsed the the storylines enough. The detour to Hoth, I can live with. The difficulty, I think, is Durga going to visit Leia feels like the only way to get Leia into the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the downside, is that I think that Anderson feels obligated to make sure those characters get in the story somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Han, Leia, Luke. They got to be in there. And it's one of those things where when I look at this, I do see shades of problems that have sort of haunted later Star Wars stuff, where this feels a lot like what Abrams and Johnson did with the sequel trilogy, where there are a lot of ideas thrown together as opposed to a cohesive through line.
100%. Yep.
Where we're just sort of like, it's a story, but it's not like, it's a bridge sort of thing. Like that's not even the way to say it. It's just at the end of it, I was entertained with this book, but I wasn't in love with it. I was like, it's fine. And that's about the extent of my feeling on it. It's like, it's fine. It's good. I had a good time with it. It's silly. And I think that I struggle with the fact that I think Kevin Anderson's a good writer. He moves things. It just goes along, and he's not sitting there. It's not laborious to read anything from him. It flows. He's really good at description. I can picture everything very well. He lays things out. The characters are clear. Dorsk 81 is different from Kip, is different from Luke, is different from Callista. I don't have any character bleed. Do you feel the same way? Were the characters distinct enough for you?
No, I think, and this is probably an issue for me, in the sense that I had just listened to a bunch of Timothy Zahn, and Zahn's dialogue and the way the characters come across, the way they act, everything about what he does, I would dare to say is kind of pitch perfect. It feels like Luke as written by George Lucas, basically. It doesn't feel like he's ever saying anything that feels off, right? I feel like here, the dialogue for the characters just felt very surface level. And in a way, it didn't feel like the voice of the characters always. Now, I'm not saying that he never captured them. I'm just saying that there were times where it felt like the characters were almost divorced from themselves, in the sense that they just didn't sound like themselves. Which, when you're writing, and everyone knows this, when you're writing a tie-in novel, that's exactly what you want to do. You need the voices of the characters to sound consistent to themselves, so that as a person is reading, they can always hear the voice of the actor as that person saying that, and it sound correct. And I think there were many places in here, specifically with the character of Luke, where that did not seem like that was the case. And a big part of that is the storyline that he's having to plug into here with Callista. But I think there are even places where Leia doesn't necessarily feel like that, even Han and others. And so Chewbacca always sounds like Chewbacca, though, so that's great. Regardless.
Yeah, it's tough to nail Chewbacca.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard writing. To get that really wrong, honestly. But so, I think. I think that this is just one of those places too where the EU itself, it was full of ups and downs with the story and stories and writers, and obviously some were more successful than others. Even some authors had books that you really liked, and then they would have ones where you're like, that one's not as my favorite, And so I think that was another part of this, where it was just like, this just didn't seem to work for me on the levels that other books had, even maybe by Kevin J. Anderson.
But see, let me throw this out there, because this is an ancient thing, and you can vouch for me, and I know I've said it before throughout the history of the show. When Disney announced that the old EU was dead, so that it would free them up to tell other stories, and not feel obliged to stick within those guidelines, I was very happy. And while it seems that I have a better, impression of Darksaber than you do, it's still a book that I read and I go, so when people are freaking out and saying like, oh, the EU, you should have never gotten rid of the EU. I read Darksaber and I'm like, what are you holding on to here?
Yeah.
Like, what is it here? What is it that is so vaunted for you? You're really kind of holding on to your memories more than anything. Because I'm reading this book right now. You're going to tell me I got to play by these rules? That's insane.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have a problem with them bringing Thrawn back because they brought Thrawn in and worked him into new continuity. Completely works. Works beautifully well. In fact, works probably better than I would have ever expected. What I find hysterical, because I made reference to Abrams and Johnson before, there are two things I'll throw out here. One is the Abrams and Johnson thing, where I look at it and I go, they just couldn't get away from Death Star tech even back then.
Yeah.
And throughout the entire sequel trilogy, it's like, oh, it's a Death Star but a planet. Oh, this gun is based on Death Star tech. Oh, these Star Destroyers have Death Star guns on them. And I'm like, why can't we get away from this? And then I come back and I look at Darksaber from 1995, 31 years ago, and I go, oh man, we were trapped then too. Come on, guys. But the other thing that I'd love to get your reaction to is this is a book where in the beginning, we're already trying to move beyond the impression of the Tusken Raiders as just mindless brutes. We're introduced to this richer culture, the storytelling tradition, the wearing the garb, all of that type of stuff. I mean, those 2 points, right? The Death Star tech and the Tusken Raiders. Do you see any similarities with like what they've done with new continuity, both good and bad?
Yeah, no, I mean, 100%. I think, I think the writers even then, were thinking to themselves that there had to be more to these characters. There had to be more than this civilization. And I think, having them be hard people because of where they live and everything makes sense. But the fact that they would have a culture and that they would be richer than just kind of people who do nothing but mindlessly kill people for fun, I think is great. And so I applaud them for kind of working to do that. I think it's the same way that you saw Karen Travers do that with the Mandalorian culture and try to give them more and, flesh them out. I think, to quote the other Star franchise, I think it's the reason you see something like Deep Space Nine take different races like the Klingons or Cardassians or Ferengi and try to flesh them out and make them fully realized people, right? That just don't feel like cookie cutters of one another. And so I think that's the stuff that, when the authors were at their best, I think it allowed them to be able to do that, and yeah, so I'm glad that Kevin J. Anderson gave a little bit more, to this. The same way I think as kind of over the top and crazy as the Hutts were, the crazy part about this story is that I enjoy the overreaching of the Hutts to try to become a major power. This is the thing. I think this book is rife with some really interesting ideas. I think it really comes down to me is the execution of them and the fact that it felt like he's trying to execute too many ideas and therefore he never has the opportunity to really fully flesh any of them out to the fullest degree that I would hope possible. And so again, I'm not laying this at the feet of him as much as, again, like you say so many times when we talk about the 602 Club and we've even talked here, right? The director is responsible for getting the best out of the actor. And if the actor doesn't give them what they want, they can do another take and try and get that out of them. And so I think the same thing with an editor and an IP, having talked to enough of the authors and even the editors over in the other Star franchise, that's very much how it works, right? You're responsible for getting what you need story-wise and where you're hoping the whole thing's kind of going in that book, and maybe in multiple books as the editor. And so if you're not kind of quite getting what you want, yeah, you should probably make the author go back and rewrite certain sections or cuts things out. And, again, it's the same with a director. And so I don't lay this quite as much probably as others might at Kevin's feet. But there are places where I think, he's also kind of the blame to some of this too. So there's enough to go around. So
your final star rating, do we rate books out of 4 or 5? I forget. Does it cross over? Is it 5 stars?
Yeah. Right, because Goodreads does 5 stars.
All right, we'll do the Goodreads rule.
Yeah.
Okay, Goodreads rule is.
But Goodreads does not
stars.
let you do half stars.
I know, which would make it.
So it's like Darren Moser.
Right, Darren would be thrilled.
Yeah, Goodreads is the Darren Moser of rating systems.
Yes.
And I am going to go with a 2.
Okay.
This is just not a book that I would ever revisit. As I have been revisiting a lot of Star Wars this year, I've been rereading the New Jedi Order series, and like I said, I listened to the Thrawn book series as well as The Hand of Thrawn. And also I've listened to one of the new novels, Legacy. So I've run the gamut with different types of Star Wars stories, and this one is firmly middle to bottom of what I've read or listened to this year. So what about you?
Okay. Well, and this is not the only one we're going to be reading on the show this year, just so you guys know. We're going to be having a lot of fun with this. And maybe, just maybe, because he hates it so much, we're going to have to read Planet of the Twilight. I don't know. Write in. Let us know. Force him to read,
I mean, if you
please.
give us 10 new star ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts, and I do mean brand new reviews and ratings, we will read it. I promise. That's a challenge to the readers.
Even if you were to go set up a bot. Yeah, do it, please. Well, yeah, I am nicer to this book than you are. And I think it's because I just had fun reading it. It's so silly. It's so over the top. It refuses to take itself too seriously, which I appreciate, because it's not like Anderson is a good writer. And when he's invested in what's going on in the book, it's a lot of fun. When he's making commentary, because I know this was part of his commentary on Jedi in the Jedi Academy trilogy as well, is how ineffective construction crews and bureaucratic meetings and all of this stuff. There's the guy obviously worked in sectors of business and government that definitely echo. I don't know his actual background, but this is the voice of somebody like Scott Adams with Dilbert commenting on the phone company, where it's I feel like you've been through these sorts of things before. So I give it a 3. I think it's fun. Would I recommend this to a non-Star Wars fan? Not in 400,000 years. No non-Star Wars fan is going to read this book and be like, well, know, this was really deep. No. But if you're a Star Wars fan, especially an older Star Wars fan who's just looking to just have a silly beach read, I'm a slow reader, folks. I'm a super slow reader. And I polished this thing off in 4.5 days.
You finished it before I did.
That's lightning fast for me. And it's just, I just think it's fun. So it's 3 stars for me, but a 5-star experience for me is interacting with you online, Matt. So where can people interact with you out there?
Well, I would love to give you a 5-star event. So interact with me on social media under the name Matt Rushing02. All over social media, that's my name. So if I'm on the platform, that's where you'll find me. Of course, you can also find me here on the network doing Owl Post with Dre Kaufman as we talk about every single chapter of the Harry Potter series, one chapter at a time. So if you like lit talk, that's a place for you. Over on the TFM network, I'm on the 602 Club, talking about all of the franchises we love. And then a lot of great Star Trek talk with my good friend Chris Jones there too. So I hope you'll check all of those out. But John, if people wanted to get maybe some more literature recommendations from you, where would they find you?
Well, gosh, I love giving literature recommendations because I read some zany stuff, and you can find me out there on Goodreads and Letterboxd talking about movies over there. But Goodreads is for books under the username Kessel Junkie, which has been my online name since 2002 2002, 2003, something like that. Anyway, and you can, of course, find me on kesseljunkie.com, blogging on occasion. And you can find me here on the network co-hosting a show called House Lights with Darren Moser and Tristan Riddell, where we talk about different movies and franchises and stuff through the lens of the directors who steered them through, which, like Matt said, an editor is a director or a producer, really. An editor is a producer, and he wants his director, who's the writer, to produce the film that's going to make him money, the book that's going to make him money. And Darksaber made money, but it might not have won hearts. So with that, I say I got to go back and I got to go put my copy of Darksaber in acid-free protective paper so that I never lose this copy ever again. So I think it's time to close these negotiations.
John, negotiations are closed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.